In the country are already back in school, many for the first time in more than a year.
Under the roaring lights of MetLife Stadium, a man stands tall, sweat glistening on his helmet, breath heavy, eyes locked on destiny. The crowd erupts, and for a brief second, time itself seems to freeze. That man is Michael Strahan. But before the Super Bowl rings, before the laughter of morning television, before the world called him a legend, there was a boy who never quite fit in. A boy who moved from country to country, who carried the weight of other people's expectations before he even knew his own strength. How does a warrior built for battle become the smiling face that millions wake up to every morning? How does a man who made a career out of breaking through defenses find the courage to lower his own? This isn't just the story of a champion. It's the journey of a man who learned that the hardest fights happen long after the game is over. And to understand the man the world sees today, we must return to where his story truly began. Michael Strahan was born on November 21, 1971, in Houston, Texas, the youngest of 6 children in a close, disciplined family. His father, Gene, served proudly in the U.S. Army, while his mother, Louise, was a teacher who believed that strength began in the mind long before it reached the body. When Michael was 9, the Strahan family moved to Mannheim, Germany, where his father was stationed. For a boy who already felt out of place, the distance from home made him feel invisible. The language was foreign, the streets unfamiliar, and the other kids, they saw him as different. He was tall, quiet, and unsure. The gentle giant who didn't yet understand what his size meant. The local playgrounds became his training ground, not just for his body, but for his will. His father, ever the soldier, made him train in the cold German mornings, push-ups on the concrete, running until breath turned to steam. His mother would watch from the window, her hands clasped, knowing that each drop of sweat was not punishment, but preparation. Michael later said, "I didn't have much, but I had love, and that was more than enough." Germany gave him solitude, and solitude gave him focus. While others saw isolation, he found clarity. By the time he returned to the United States as a teenager, he wasn't the same boy who had left. The quiet kid from Germany had turned into something else entirely. A young man built not just by muscle, but by purpose. When Michael returned to the United States for his final year of high school, the world seemed too big, and he seemed too late. Most top players had already been scouted, their futures written. But Michael Strahan was determined to write his own. He began training with relentless focus. Every sunrise in Houston was another chance to prove he belonged. His uncle Art, who once played professional football, saw something in him. Not just size, but heart. Under Art's guidance, Michael learned the science of the game. The angles, the leverage, the patience. Soon, Texas Southern University took notice. A small school with a big dreamer. There were no glamorous facilities, no national cameras, no promises of fame, just dirt fields and determination. There, he became a quiet storm. Game after game, his power grew, a force impossible to ignore. Coaches from bigger programs started whispering, "Who's that kid from Texas Southern?" But the NFL doesn't make room easily for underdogs. When the 1993 draft came, the odds were stacked against him. He wasn't from a powerhouse school, and most analysts overlooked his name. Then came the call. The New York Giants, a team built on grit and defense, took a chance on the young man who refused to quit. In that moment, everything changed. The boy who once ran drills in the cold German dawn was now standing at the gates of the biggest stage in American sports. Yet, as he would soon learn, making it to the NFL wasn't the finish line. It was the beginning of a new war, one fought not just with strength, but with pain, patience, and an unshakable will. The early years in New York were brutal. Rookie mistakes, relentless critics, and injuries that tested both body and faith. Many players would have folded, but not Michael Strahan. He studied the game like a scientist studies chaos. Every missed tackle became data. Every defeat, a lesson. He learned to turn frustration into fuel and pain into precision. By the late 90s, he wasn't just playing football. He was redefining defense. His speed, his timing, his ability to read a quarterback's fear made him a nightmare for offenses across the league. And then came 2001, the year everything clicked. In a season that would make history, Strahan recorded 22.5 sacks, breaking the NFL single-season record. It wasn't just dominance, it was artistry. Every snap, every charge, every collision told a story of a man who had waited his whole life for this moment. But even greatness comes with noise. Some questioned his record, calling it luck. Others said he was past his prime. Michael just smiled. He'd learned that silence was the best response to doubt. Over the next few years, his legacy grew. He became the soul of the New York Giants, a leader, a mentor, and a voice of calm in chaos. His presence alone could shift the rhythm of a game. Then, in 2007, after 14 grueling seasons, the impossible happened. The Giants faced the undefeated New England Patriots in Super Bowl XXIV. The Giants against the gods. Against all odds, Strahan and his team crushed perfection. As confetti rained down, Michael stood on the field, tears mixing with sweat, his arms raised to the sky. For a man who had spent years fighting for respect, this was not just victory. It was validation. The stadium roared. The Warrior had conquered the game. But he didn't yet know. His next battle wouldn't be on the field. It would be with himself. When Michael Strahan walked away from the game in 2007, he left with a ring, a record, and a roar of applause that echoed through history. But the silence that followed was deafening. The stadium lights faded. The cheers were gone. And for the first time in decades, there was no schedule, no playbook, no team. Retirement wasn't peace. It was confusion. Off the field, Michael's personal life began to crumble. His marriage unraveled in public, followed by painful accusations and a highly publicized divorce. The same tabloids that once praised him now devoured every rumor, every detail, every photo. For a man who had built his identity on control, fame became a prison of exposure. He smiled on camera, but behind that famous gap-toothed grin was exhaustion. He was learning the cruel truth. Success doesn't protect you from heartbreak. Sometimes it magnifies it. When he transitioned to television, the judgment only grew louder. Many dismissed him as just another athlete trying to be a star. Others mocked his voice, his demeanor, even his laugh. And yet, behind the scenes, the hardest blow was still to come. In 2016, after years of co-hosting Live, with Kelly and Michael, his abrupt exit from the show exploded into headlines. Rumors of tension, betrayal, and ego filled every feed. The press called it a TV divorce. Michael never lashed out. He didn't need to. He had learned long ago that real strength isn't proven by the noise you make, but by the silence you keep. This was the fall, not of a career, but of certainty. The Warrior had conquered giants, but now he faced something far greater: the battle to rebuild himself. For most people, redemption begins in silence. For Michael Strahan, it began in a smile. After the storm of headlines and heartbreak, he chose not to retreat, but to rebuild. Instead of running from the spotlight, he stepped into it with a new purpose. When he joined Good Morning America, audiences expected the athlete, but they found the human. His laughter was genuine, his warmth disarming. He wasn't performing anymore. He was connecting. The same intensity that once fueled his tackles now fueled empathy, curiosity, and charm. Television didn't just give him a second act. It gave him a second voice. He became the bridge between worlds, the gladiator and the gentleman, the powerhouse and the peacemaker. And while critics had once questioned his range, now they praised his versatility. From Fox NFL's Sunday to morning news, from serious interviews to light-hearted moments, Strahan moved with the ease of a man who had nothing left to prove. Off-screen, he devoted himself to causes close to his heart: youth programs, education, veterans. He used his platform to lift others, to remind them that success wasn't about where you stood, but how many you helped stand with you. He once said, "I learned that you don't change who you are to fit the room. You changed the room by being who you are. It was no longer about chasing glory. It was about embodying grace. The fall had stripped away the armor, but beneath it, he found something stronger: authenticity. And in that honesty, Michael Strahan became something rare in Hollywood and sports alike. A man admired not for what he conquered, but for how he came back. Michael Strahan's name now stands where few ever reach: a place between sports and culture, strength and kindness, fame and humility. On the field, he remains one of the most dominant defensive ends in NFL history. His 22.5 sack season still stands as a benchmark, not just of power, but of perseverance. His induction into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2014 wasn't just an honor. It was a full-circle moment for a man who once felt invisible. But perhaps his greatest legacy isn't measured in numbers or trophies. It's measured in transformation. He redefined what an athlete could become after the game, not a fallen hero, but a reinvented one. Through television, philanthropy, and authenticity, Strahan became a new kind of icon, a man who could inspire fans, guide young athletes, and bring light to millions every morning. Colleagues describe him as a natural leader without trying. Audiences describe him as the reason mornings feel human again. He showed that greatness isn't confined to the stadium. It's how you carry it into the world. For every young player dreaming under Friday night lights, and every viewer starting their day with uncertainty, Michael's story whispers the same truth: you can begin again. You can rebuild. You can rise, and rise better. His journey proved that true champions aren't remembered for how hard they hit, but for how gracefully they stand when the world expects them to fall. In the years that followed his second rise, Michael Strahan learned that peace doesn't come from applause. It comes from alignment. He began focusing on what truly mattered: his family, his health, and the simple rhythm of ordinary days. The man once defined by noise now found beauty in quiet. Mornings with his children replaced stadium lights. Conversations over coffee replaced the roar of the crowd. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel the need to be on. He often speaks about gratitude, not as a cliché, but as survival. "I've had the highs and the lows," he says, "and I realized happiness isn't about avoiding pain. It's about appreciating the balance between the two." Strahan also became a mentor, guiding younger athletes through the traps of fame, the money, the ego, the illusion that success equals fulfillment. He tells them the truth few dare to say: the game ends for everyone. What matters is what begins after. At this stage of his life, Michael carries a calm confidence, the kind that can only be earned through falling and rising again. He's still competitive, still ambitious, but grounded in a new kind of victory: peace of mind. The armor is gone, but the strength remains. The man who once fought battles in front of millions now wins quieter ones, the ones within. In the end, Michael Strahan's story isn't about football. It's about evolution, the kind that happens when a man refuses to be defined by where he started, or even where he stumbled. From the lonely fields of Germany to the blinding lights of the Super Bowl, from heartbreak to healing, he has lived many lives, and somehow, each one made him more whole. The boy who once questioned his place in the world became a man who helps others find theirs. The athlete who once chased victory now teaches the value of vulnerability. The warrior learned that real strength isn't in the roar of the crowd. It's in the quiet courage to begin again. There are men who win championships, and then there are men who redefine what victory means. Michael Strahan is both. Because power fades, fame shifts, but purpose, that endures. He is proof that greatness doesn't end with the game. Sometimes, that's exactly where it begins. This is Stars and Scandals, where legends are born twice,